The horror genre isn't designed solely to entertain, but to rattle the masses, offering haunting visuals that are expected to last a lifetime. Of course, this is easier said than done. Once horror veterans have seen a few hundred slashers and monster B-movies, it can be hard to provoke as big a reaction. But as has been established in our previous video, there are certain nail-biting flicks which will leave anyone not just frightened, but utterly befuddled. Rather than following tried and tested tropes, these features decided to play by their own rules. After all, after watching a movie involving mutant children, a giant egg, murderous tomatoes, or whatever that creature was in Men, who can say that they were truly the same person afterwards? I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 more. What the fuck did I just pay to see? Horror movies. Number 10. The Loved Ones. She might not be as iconic as Chucky or Pinhead, but there's no doubt Lola from The Loved Ones is among the evilest horror villains ever. The story follows a high schooler named Brent, who's been suicidal ever since his father died. Sadly, Brent's suffering has only just begun. Brent's classmate, Lola, has grown so infatuated with him she has him kidnapped and dragged to her house, where she has organised a makeshift prom for the two of them. Now, normal serial killer, I really just said those words. Anyway, a normal serial killer could carry out their prom fantasy before doing away with Brent. But not Lola. This world-class sicko injects bleach into his throat, destroying his vocal cords. She then has his feet pinned to the floor with knives before threatening to chop off his, bits. Just when it seems like Lola's wickedness has peaked, she reveals her cellar, which is filled with her previous abductees, still alive but brain dead. Number 9. Hatching. In this Finnish body horror, a teenage gymnast called Tinja does everything she can to win the affection of her unloving mother. After discovering a mysterious egg outside, Tinja vows to take care of it, believing she'll be a better parent than her own. When the egg hatches, a peculiar creature bursts out, who Tinja names Ali. Despite her affection towards the newborn, Ali causes Tinja's life to spiral out of control. There's also plenty of uncomfortable scenes that don't directly involve Ali. The mother is so militant with Tinja's training, she forces her daughter to perform acrobatics until she's blistered and bleeding. When Tinja is blamed for Ali's violent actions, the psychological abuse only intensifies. This cruel behaviour reaffirms Tinja's drive to nurture Ali, leading her down a path of self-destruction. And after Ali mutates into a new form and develops a psychic link with Tinja, the what the fuckness is taken to a whole other level. Number 8. Splice. Frankenstein's profound themes surrounding the human condition have allowed Mary Shelley's work to stay relevant for over 2 centuries, inspiring countless sci-fi horror stories. However, Splice is definitely one of the strangest films inspired by the iconic novel. The story centres around a pair of romantically involved geneticists, Clive and Elsa, who created a new life form called Dren by manipulating human DNA. But as Dren's primal urges develop, Clive and Elsa realise they're unable to control her. Even though the concept is disturbing in itself, the movie's content is more unnerving than anyone could have anticipated. Firstly, Elsa uses her own cells to create Dren without Clive's consent. As Dren reaches adolescence, Clive has sex with the unique organism, despite raising her like a stepdaughter since birth. When Dren misbehaves, Elsa slices off her tail and uses its DNA to further her work. Although Dren is supposed to be a monster, it's clear her so-called parents have a dark side. With that said, Dren is no angel. During the final confrontation, the hostile mutant murders several people before raping and impregnating Elsa. This means that Elsa is carrying the baby of a hybrid human cloned from her own DNA. Number 7. Spring. Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead's dark romance revolves around a young man called Evan, who's devastated by the recent loss of his mother. Heading to Italy to clear his head, he falls for a beautiful woman called Louise shortly before arriving. But with Louise disappearing in the night, smearing symbols on the wall, and occasionally gorging on bodies, it becomes clear she's harbouring a dark secret. Before you ask, no, she's not a vampire, but nice guess. Interestingly, Spring contains no horror elements whatsoever for the first half hour. This slow burn approach works in the film's favour, since it's legitimately bone-chilling when the lovey-dovey story introduces horrifying imagery and grotesque violence. Even though Spring takes its time implementing conventional scares, it never comes across as boring. The plot focuses so much on Evan and Louise's inner conflicts and unique relationship, it packs an extra wallop when the big reveal happens. Seriously, not a vampire, put it out of your head. Spring may have some nightmarish visuals, but it's sure to leave the audience feeling inspired rather than horrified once the credits roll. Number 6. The Brood. The Brood is one of the most bizarre and brilliant horror films out there, even for David Cronenberg. After Frank's unstable wife, Nola, is institutionalized, she undergoes a radical experiment involving psychoplasmics. When Frank is attacked by disfigured children shortly after, he believes they're connected to the facility Nora is residing in. Although Frank's suspicions are correct, what he learns about the establishment is more ghoulish than he could have ever imagined. Cronenberg's psychological flick may not be as iconic as his other work, but it ticks every box we've come to expect from the horror auteur. The distorted appearance and animalistic noises of the kids never fails to be unsettling. The autopsy sequence, which describes the mutant's biology in graphic detail, is guaranteed to leave hair standing on end. Despite the fact Scanners, The Fly and Videodrome are deemed Cronenberg's most outlandish movies, The Brood is pretty out there. Number 5. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. There are certain horrors that have such a nutty premise they don't sound like real movies. Elvis vs. the Mummy, a serial-killing snowman, Santa's evil twin, and who could forget about Attack of the Killer Tomatoes? As hard as it is to believe, John DeBello's parody is a more balls-to-the-wall film than it actually sounds. It contains 2 singing numbers, a man dressed as Hitler, a Jaws-inspired sequence of the tomatoes attacking their victims, and an epilogue hinting that carrots will be the next food to rise up against humanity. There are also so many needless subplots, it's easy to forget the man-eating veggies are the primary threat. Even though Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is a comedy, the most entertaining moments tend to be the unintentional, especially when a helicopter pilot genuinely loses control of his vehicle, causing him to crash. Though the posters imply the titular vegetables have fangs and monstrous features, they just look like regular tomatoes, although they can get much larger. As such, it's hilarious to watch the grumbling plants slaughtering their prey by casually bumping into them. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes isn't a great film, no big surprise there, but it's definitely an unforgettable experience. Number 4, Climax. This film got me. Gaspar Noé's psychedelic feature Climax opens with a group of French dancers celebrating after completing an intricate dance rehearsal. Upon learning the sangria has been spiked with LSD, it isn't long before everyone is at each other's throats, figuratively and literally. Climax is difficult to sit through, even before the hallucinogens kick in, since the troupe turn on one another immediately, which results in one person being locked outside and freezing to death. As the drug's effects set in, the ensemble embraces every decadent instinct and paranoid thought, causing them to attack their friends, stab themselves, and even engage in incestuous sex. Since the manager's child drank the sangria too, he's locked in an electrical room to keep him away from all the depravity. Situation ends about as well as you'd expect. Somehow, things only get worse during the third act, where the dancers suffer a drug-induced psychosis. To amplify the cerebral experience, the entire movie is filmed in one unbroken shot, meaning the hellish trip plays out in real time. The filming becomes more erratic and distorted as the story progresses, amplifying the chaos exponentially. Climax is worth a watch, but most viewers will be deeply disoriented when it's all said and done. Number 3, Teeth. In Mitchell Lichtenstein's horror comedy, a Christian teenager called Dawn O'Keefe is aghast to learn she's developed vagina dentata. In layman terms, she's got a pair of chompers downstairs. While she's processing this drastic change, several creeps try and take advantage of her, including her boyfriend, her gynecologist, and her stepbrother. After getting too close to her ladybits, each of these dirtbags ends up losing their fingers or more. Although Teeth sounds ludicrous, it takes itself surprisingly seriously. Upon her research, Dawn discovers that vagina dentata is a common theme in many cultures. For your own peace of mind, don't research it. It's also a nice change of pace to see a nice monster, since the titular beast only punishes the wicked. It's also funny how the vaginal mandibles can differentiate between good and bad. When Dawn has sex with her partner for the first time, there's no issue whatsoever. But once he admits he doesn't care about her, Dawn's inner teeth clamps down on his member. As entertaining as Teeth is, it's not an easy watch. Number 2, Men. Anyone who believes they are unfazed by scary movies should give Alex Garland's Men a shot. This perplexing folktale makes everything look creepy, whether it's crows, tunnels, letterboxes, or Rory Kinnear. The story centres around a woman called Harper, who suffers a personal tragedy, compelling her to venture to the countryside to clear her head. While there, Harper notices every male in the town, all portrayed by Kinnear, behave towards her with flippancy or hostility. After a seedy vicar and a naked man start stalking her, Harper realizes she can't run away from her problems. Even when things are relatively normal, there's always a sense of danger surrounding Harper. No matter how friendly the locals are, their voices and actions are etched with passive aggression. And when teleporting men and plant-faced creatures are thrown into the picture, it's hard to understand how Harper hasn't already lost her mind. The insanity reaches its crescendo during the climax, when Harper watches a masculine entity giving birth to a male, who in turn gives birth to another male, and so on and so on. Though men is intention ambiguous, it's impossible to know where to begin in order to decipher it. Number 1. The happiness of the Katakuris. With Ichi the Killer and Audition under his belt, Takashi Miike has a rep for cranking out seriously messed up horror. Having said that, Miike has never devised anything as bewildering as the happiness of the Katakuris. In this wacky tale, the Katakuri family opened a bed and breakfast to solve their debt problems. But when their guests keep winding up dead, the family's lives grow more complicated. At first, that premise doesn't sound particularly mind-boggling. However, it's the way the story plays out that's bizarre. In one of the first scenes, a woman finds a goblin-like creature in her soup. As she screams, she turns into a claymation figure before the critter pulls her uvula out. Just when it looks like things couldn't get any more head-scratching, the film finds a way to top itself. After the titular family discover the first dead body, the movie inexplicably turns into a musical, with the cast singing and dancing for 5 minutes straight. If you ever wanted to watch a karaoke-styled musical zombie horror comedy, which is very specific, Happiness of the Katakuris is a must-watch.